Hello, I'm Shieldall100 and welcome to a different type of video from me. I thought I'd share some observations I've had whilst building up a collection of urban scenery over the course of many years. To this end, I'll be going through several of the manufacturers I've experienced with and showing you the differences between their ranges and how they might fit into any plans you might have to expand or even start your own little patch of Gotham or a similar cityscape. First, a few ground rules. I'll be focusing in on items for purchase and assembly, as I believe that to be the most common way for wargamers to outfit their boards. I know that scratch building is a thing, and I see some wonderful projects online. I even made my little park out of various kits I joined together myself, so I know that this could be done. However, if you have the passion to do this across an entire gaming board's worth of scenery, then you don't need me to help you with your inspiration, and novices who need help with construction will need to look to someone else who's got actual better skill than I, if that's the kind of tutorial you're after. With that in mind, buildings can be sourced quite effectively by most people in the hobby now, and these products really do make collecting a board's worth of scenery much easier than when I was starting in the hobby several decades ago. So it's on this aspect we will focus. Next, I'll be showcasing and talking about manufacturers that produce buildings and structures rather than just street furniture. This is because many producers of scenery for almost any theme have something in their range that could be applicable here, and I wouldn't be able to scratch the surface. I believe that every outfit I describe today that makes model buildings also has at least a small selection of street obstacles too. You'll notice that my selection of manufacturers is very UK centric in perspective, as may be some of my observations. Obviously this is because I'm from the UK, but I'll try to bear this in mind as I talk, and hopefully the present troubles will be sorted out regarding shipping and everything else, and so no one will see a cool kit but can be prevented from having it due to logistical issues. Before I get into the manufacturers themselves, I'll be looking at the extent of the range, the price range you might find, and how suited they are to wargaming. Seeing as how my current primary interest is the Batman miniatures game, it's important to me that the models are an interactive part of the board, instead of sort of boxes of dead space which are inaccessible to my models. I'll also be covering anything else I find pertinent. You'll probably notice that all of the manufacturers I cover also, they primarily or entirely do MDF terrain. That's because that's my personal favourite material for scenery for this sort of scale. It's the cost stroke, everything else factor. I mean, you can get resin buildings, for example, but they tend to be heavy and expensive. Plastic is a thing, but again, it tends to be on the limited scale at this point of time in the chronology, and I haven't really found anything in the 3D printing phase of things. And finally, you can get paper buildings as well, but paper is not a long-term solution as far as I'm concerned. So you'll see, if you do some research, you'll probably see why I'm focusing on MDF for this video at the very least. In terms of pricing, when covering these, it's important to bear in mind that the hobby of miniature wargaming isn't traditionally considered cheap. The Batman miniatures game in particular is at the premium end of the scale, so financial outlay can be high already. A good board can set you back as much as you're willing to pay, so I'm going to cover how much the buildings are roughly in my observations, but you need to remember that pre-coloured buildings don't have the financial outlay associated with painting supplies, so although they may be more expensive to start with, there's a cost to actually painting them as well. It's a rabbit hole you can fall far down, but let's get into looking at the people making the goods. First up, we have Multiverse Gaming Terrain. They're an operation based in Poland. The buildings themselves largely come from their Dark City range, if you search for it. But first I'm going to quickly mention their Versatiles gaming board. It's a sturdy MDF modular board that adds three-dimensionality to your board before a single piece of scenery is even on it. I find it way better than any gaming mat or cloth, and it even has road marking stencils. It's great stuff and I can recommend it. But back to the buildings. They themselves hover around the €30 mark. That's around £25 currently, and I'd say that's about an average price on a building for building basis. Most inner city locations are covered, including nice and nasty residential type buildings, as well as various shops and some municipal buildings. There's a standard variety of street furniture too, and some rooftop accessories to stretch the decoration and your wallet if you wish to taste. There's good detail provided. Most of the standard buildings are without more surfaces than just the rooftop, but sufficient detail around the windows and on walls to make these stand out on the tabletop. I can also recommend the industrial selection on this website too. You might notice that these have been used in several of my battle reports. I really like them. They're very modular and well in keeping with many gaming themes, not just superheroes but also zombies, other modern conflicts and stuff take place around chemical plants perhaps, like special ops and things. Maybe somebody purchasing a building from one of the other ranges to supplement their collection could recommend considering this range whilst you're on their website, definitely. Big range this. TT Combat and their City Streets range particularly come from the pointy end of the UK. They're one of the longest standing producers of MDF terrain in the UK, and to my knowledge this range is still expanding and updating at the current time. I think they were redoing several of their buildings actually when I spoke to them at a show recently. With regard to price, you'll find that these are the very competitive price point end of the market. A standard tenement type building comes in at between £14 to £16, with larger buildings costing more but always seeming cheap for what you get. As for detail, these, relatively speaking, are at the low end of the scale. The construction is simple for the most part, but if mistakes creep in, they're not as easily covered as most exterior detail is etched directly onto the walls. So you might end up with some gaps, perhaps, if you've been a bit unlucky or careless. I'm more careless than unlucky, but it goes either way. The range on offer is massive, though. We've got residential properties, shops, public buildings, all sorts of vehicles, cranes, all sorts of things, many of which are available whole and ruined as well. The exterior detail is a bit clunky, kind of basic sometimes, but it's sufficient to prevent the eye from just seeing static wooden boxes as well. There's the windows just stand out enough, etc., etc. Additional building decorations such as air conditioning units, etc., are available very reasonably priced as well, although some street furniture can look a little bit clunky by modern standards, especially compared to other offerings. Again though, very competitively priced and good for filler. Being fairly basic buildings in many respects, the ability for gaming interactions is limited. Many of the buildings lack surfaces such as balconies, etc., to move to aside from the rooftops themselves, although there is massive variety within the range, leading to great diversity in heights and therefore more interactability. Some of the other kits you'll find though can really spice up your boards in ways you won't find in other ranges. There's things in this massive range which just simply aren't there elsewhere. Overall, this is a cost-effective range and generally readily available, even overseas. It's very possible to complete a diverse and detailed board from just this storefront. You don't need to go anywhere else. And I wouldn't say, despite what I've said earlier, these are not the cheap and nasty end of the thing, end of the spectrum. They're not cheap and nasty, but they may require a little bit more work than other makers to make them do justice to your model collection at the end of the day. Next up we've got Foreground's Gothic City range. Again, another UK manufacturer. I think these are one of the original two MDF kit makers I was ever made aware of. It was them and Sarissa Precision back in the day. What I would describe as the premium end of the market, probably. Just to give an example, a two-storey tenement building comes in about £36 for this company, but most of the kits are larger than this, and the cost does rise up quite a lot as well. So why would a young, money-conscious Shield Wall 100 look at this range when alternatives cost around half as much? Well, these are pre-coloured kits with multiple layers of MDF at varying thicknesses, and this lends the buildings a much more three-dimensional look, and the laser cutting process even seems to sort of weather them. The slight burn marks really do sort of, you don't need to paint them out or anything, that you can leave them on, and it kind of, like I said, it kind of ages the look of the building altogether as well. Got to bear in mind, these are pre-coloured, not pre-painted as well, so that's actually also better in my opinion. It adds a considerable time and effort saving element to your purchase as well. As I said, the level of detail is incredible, and that's just from gluing the parts together. I found that the addition of putting extra layers over the corners went towards hiding any small incremental areas that might creep in as you're adding the layers on, when you're assembling them. However, after almost a decade, the examples of this manufacturer's work that I have, they're still solidly together. So, didn't even notice the errors, if there were any. The tenement buildings remain boxy because that's kind of what a tenement building is, although there's sufficient attention paid to style within the facades that they look very much like actual buildings. All other buildings within the range look designed for dynamic miniatures games, so you've got balconies, raised areas, fire escapes, etc. So even non-flying models could gain access to more than just the roof, reasonably. And your more manoeuvrable figures, bat claws, flying models, jetpacks, that sort of thing, they'll really be able to stretch their legs on this terrain. The range is fairly limited in scope, though, with pretty much all the buildings being in the residential style, so no shops, and the more upmarket areas around town than that. Street furniture is also available within this range, again pre-coloured for great convenience. It should also be mentioned that Foreground hosts some independent MDF terrain designers, and one of them at least has something to offer the superhero gaming community in their Fairground range. Go on the website, have a search, and just see what I mean. I think it's quite a pleasant surprise. Right, overall, it's not the cheapest way to design and build a board, and I can surmise that the relative expense compared to just about all the other options is what led to the Gothic City range here not being really expanded since I saw the initial explosion of MDF terrain several years ago. Most of the buildings I've seen in my research today, they're the same ones that were on sale back then as well. It's definitely worth taking a look at these kits though, to see if there's a piece in there that you want as a centerpiece for your uptown style scenery, and maybe treat yourself at some stage. They're really nice. That said, I don't think of Foreground as only a premium end money is no object type stockist. There's a niche here that they fulfill really well. It's one that many wargamers may recognise and appreciate. If you have a problem with a hobby pile, or the pile of shame, whatever you want to call it, and this is with your models alone, let alone your scenery projects, you may find that the relatively boring part of terrain building and worse, painting, is something you just don't get around to at all, and you just leave those kits, stacked up. At least with Foreground, there is just the one stage of assembly. You just glue it together, and then the building's done. Boom. I can personally tell you it's a great psychological difference to know that something will be ready for use straight after the glue has dried. Having unpainted buildings taking up precious storage space, that seems even doubly disheartening, because they're taking up all that room on your shelves or your boxes, and there's still, you've got a load of work still to do on them as well. It's just, don't get that. You don't have that with Foreground. Okay, coming in from Australia with the Century City range, we've got Knights of Dice. They're relatively new to me, but I've heard about them and the quality for some time. Given that the UK is something of a stronghold for wargaming and wargame supplies, manufacturers, etc., the fact that this range can make waves within the arguably well catered for market over here tells of the quality alone. Full disclosure, I'm basing my observations regarding quality, etc., upon a Soul kit that I've sourced from Shiny Games in the UK, but what a kit. Clearly designed with the intent to fit into the Batman miniatures game. There's an Art Deco quality throughout the entire range, which is applied consistently. So, you buy several buildings from this lot, they're going to look right together. The price range clocks in at just a shade more than average, around £30 for a building. although it looks like these ones clock in with a bit more size than the offerings from, say, TT Combat, so bigger footprint. All model buildings I'll be covering a little bit on the small side anyway, real life buildings being much bigger proportionally to people, but these look to have a footprint a little bit more on the realistic side. So overall you may find yourself purchasing fewer buildings and therefore less financial outlay. Or if you're me, you'll just buy as many anyway. It's up to you. As you can see from the Iceberg Lounge, aka the Glacier Lodge, it's been designed with the idea of playing a game on it, and potentially also through it if you were so inclined to add interior details of your own. As you can see, there's some interior details like a skeleton of such. You could just add some partition walls and furniture if you wanted. It will definitely take centre stage of the board that you put it on, and most of the other buildings in the range are designed to do the similar thing. You know, if you look at them, I'm sure you'll agree. The range is relatively modest in terms of variety at the moment, covering tidy residential buildings with some that could be described more as landmarks, such as the lodge here. Think of Batman the Animated Series style architecture and you're not far off, and that should be a nice reference for people, a positive one. You can also find the standard array of complementary street furniture there. Meanwhile, those of you desiring to theme a board could look at the entire range of Chinatown buildings and accessories, or the waterfront with a very Killing Joke carnival. Did I mention that many of the buildings also come in ruined versions? So when I say it's a modest range, that's more of a comment that there's a good number of buildings spread thinly across a variety of themes, some of which will work with each other better than others on the gaming board. So overall, it's very impressive. Maybe not the cheapest, but it looks like there are more game possibilities among this range than with others. Australia seems so often to get the rough end of the toilet stick when it comes to miniatures and wargaming and prices and shipping and things. But in this range and this manufacturer, they do seem to have something that I'm envious of. That's not to say these kits won't be readily available to you wherever you may be watching, and if they are readily available, then they should be a major consideration if you're putting a board together. Definitely worth a look at, yeah. Okay, slightly tricky to pronounce their name unless it is just phonetically thexlc.co.uk. These are a new bunch to me, but I found them at a Wargame show in the UK. It was the Reading Games Club's show which was in Ascot. So work that out. And immediately my attention, though, once I walked past the table, was grabbed. Had to make a purchase then and there because it was kind of it got me. They're from the Northampton area apparently. This is their Urban Decay range, and as you can probably gather from what you're seeing, these are more pre-coloured kits. Not pre-painted, pre-coloured. However, unlike Foreground, these are not many components of differently coloured MDF. These are fairly blocky, thick MDF buildings with intricate designs printed onto their facings, so different style. The overall aesthetic is very dark indeed. I think Urban Decay as a theme is more post-apocalyptic in design than others I've shown today, possibly like Fallout or something. But if anything, Gotham is often portrayed more like this than a glistening metropolis. Therefore, I think that this range has some play in being dropped into existing collections. Perhaps, maybe it's a crime scene or similar, where the structure's been burnt down itself, or suffered extreme, damage in in some sort of superhero attack or something. The buildings themselves are very reasonably priced indeed. The food shacks came to £15 and the diner itself here was £20 for a whole building, and at present nothing in the range exceeds this price of £20. Note, I haven't found a tenement building to compare it with because, the Urban Decay range only has commercial buildings at present. It's got dilapidated diners, restaurants, shops, hotels, bits like that so far. So no residential. So there's not much in the way of variety to choose from so far, but with most games set in this, them being skirmish games, I could see you getting a decent 3x3 foot square of surface out of this. The buildings are made of thick, sturdy MDF, so once they are together, they won't be coming apart quickly under duress. Looking across the range, there's some good gaming possibilities with these structures, as even the ones without balconies, and some do, or exposed stairs, have roofs that look like could be scaled quite reasonably. You know, the surfaces look like they could have handholds in and things, so you could scramble up them. As you may also have noticed, their designs also cover you for weathering effects and graffiti already, and in my opinion these are done really, really well. Obviously they're preset designs, so you don't get to change them around, but I think what they've done is really good. As a possible suggestion, if alternative artwork could be made for these building templates, then this may increase the variety of types of shops that could be furnished within the range, possibly less resource intensive than designing a whole new structure from scratch, and because gamers like variety on their boards, you know, you wouldn't want to see a line of the same shops, so different artwork on the same templates might help out. I don't know though. I'm not Joe Marketing, I don't know this stuff. I'm sure the aesthetic won't be to everyone's liking, especially those with existing collections, especially if your buildings are nice and clean and squeaky. There isn't much you could do to fit these into a different theme from what they're already portraying. Even the decoration is pretty much fixed. That said, I think they would very much complement the existing Night Models card buildings that have been released and are part of the various past starter sets you might have seen. Again, there is no more concern with these kits once they're glued, and the prices are presently a steal. So if the range continues to grow, I'll watch this with great interest. Oh, and by the way, this range also uniquely includes interior detailing. Okay, well, I hope that this selection of manufacturers has been interesting to you. I won't have covered everything. I'm sure there are many outfits abroad and in the UK that I haven't told you about. I mean, I mentioned Sarissa Precision earlier and I haven't featured them, although I think they're more, in their style, they're more Americana than Inner City in theme, but they could certainly become the basis for a detailed urban board. I just don't have any of their products to show off, so I can't. I haven't covered anything produced in the US of A either, and I bet there's producers out there with a great variety as well. These days we do have a massive advantage over previous generations of wargamers in that we have access to so much these days, even for a relatively niche market, and I couldn't hope to cover everything. That said, I hope that my observations at least help you if you decide to start collecting a board for this setting, or to add to your existing collection. Beyond your budget in money, time and expertise you have to spend on your project, just look at the products you're considering and how they'll enhance your games. After all, most of the time our figures will have our attention in this spectacle, and the terrain is there so that you can help them look their very best. It's not really the other way around. As I said earlier, the manufacturers covered were picked because they sold buildings primarily, but if you're after street furniture, or scatter furniture, whatever, there are many more that produce this as supplements to their other ranges. The ubiquitous shipping crates, for example, are available from just about everyone who makes terrain covering the 20th century, and you'll see plenty of different odds and ends within my battle reports, Well, okay, I think I've spoken enough now. I do enjoy a well put together gaming board, and you can tell when someone really has their heart in it, and that's how I hope mine come across. I hope that this might cause some inspiration somewhere and maybe help someone in the future. I'm Shield War 100, and I'll see you then. Take care and goodbye.